welcome to the Tees Valley International Film Festival podcast. I'm Sarah and today we are at ARC in Stockton with the man who got knocked down and keeps getting back up again, formerly of Chumbawamba. It's Dunstan Bruce.
I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never gonna keep me down. I get knocked down, but I get up again.
Good afternoon.
And good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, Dunstan.
You're welcome.
So, Dunstan, you are from Billingham. You then went to Leeds to start your band. What took you to Leeds?
When I was a teenager in the 70s, I really wanted to get out of Billingham. I couldn't wait to get out of Billingham. I didn't want to get a job. So I went to Leeds Poly to study architecture, which is why I first went to Leeds. But I didn't realise how long the course was. It's like a 7-year course or something.
I was going to say
so I got there and started it and I thought, oh my God, 7 years. And then I thought going to university was you only went in 1 or 2 days a week. Well, I had to go in 5 days a week. So
it was much more intense than you had initially thought.
It was a massive shock. It was a huge shock. Anyway, basically, I just used that as a platform to meet people, other people, and that's how I met the other people in Chumbawamba. Was because I wanted to be in a band, and I put this advert up in a record shop when people used to do that sort of thing, and Boff answered that advert, and so I met him, and we developed a friendship, and then he joined my band, I joined his band became Chumbawamba. And so it all started, and then we started squatting, because you could do that in this would be the 80s now. You could squat back then. We found this huge house to live in, and so we all lived together and had the band going at the same time.
So with your music, so you do have channel a lot of your political activist views through your music. Were you all in the band? Were you all on like a similar wavelength with those views?
Yeah, it's interesting because we were all from different places. Mm-hmm. You know, I was from Billingham. There was quite a few people from Burnley.
Okay.
Some from Barnsley.
Mm-hmm.
So we were all from like northern industrial towns.
Yes.
Basically, all with a sort of like working class background. Mm-hmm. None of us were musicians as such. You know, none of us could claim to be trained musicians.
Right.
There was only maybe Harry who played drums, whose dad was a cabaret, whose dad still is a cabaret singer in Barnsley, and he learned to play drums by going out to working men's clubs and playing drums for his dad.
Wow.
And he was the best musician in the band. All the rest of us were just like, I'm still just winging it, really.
Yeah.
I still would not describe myself as a musician, but I just learned how to perform
mm-hmm.
and how to use music as a way of expressing, you know, your opinion, your political opinion.
Yes.
Was that your question?
Something along those lines. About how you, with you all having like similar views to channel through your music.
Yeah, that was that. Yeah. So I think we were all drawn together. I mean, there's this idea that, you know, freaks meet freaks. You eventually find your people.
You find your tribe. Absolutely.
Yeah, you find your tribe. Yeah. And so that's kind of what happened, is that we just immediately realised we had loads of stuff in common. We found, you know, we discovered that we were at the same gigs, you know, without realising before we knew each other and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And so we just had, but I think what it was initially was this advert I put up for wanting someone to join a band. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just a list of bands, you know, like you've got to be into this, this and this. It was a list of like cultural reference points. So it was more. Brilliant. So it was more like saying that I was into Coronation Street, or there used to be this program on afternoon TV called House Party. That I put that on because it was the thing to say, look, I watch shit TV, I watch crap TV, and there was a thing about that. Mm-hmm. And then there was just a list of other things that had like a political idea behind them, mm-hmm. so that it would weed out people who weren't interested in that sort of thing.
Yes.
So I think that really helped us bond over what was in that advert, I guess.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So then you had similar beliefs and values.
Yeah, right from the start. Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, right from the start. And this is the early '80s. You know, it's about '82 when the Falklands War happened in '82. So that was quite a big thing. Mm-hmm. We were very anti-war. Mm-hmm. But the big thing that really cemented, you know, a lot of people's political activism was the miners' strike that started in 1984.
Yes.
So that was a huge point at which, you know, we'd been involved in a lot of politics, single issue politics, but then that changed it to a much bigger, you know, class politics idea and how you saw the world in general and working with other people. And that sort of informed us about what we did with our music and who we wanted to hear our music and our political ideas. And so there was a whole philosophy around how do you make a point politically
Yes.
without just shouting in somebody's face.
Absolutely.
When Chumbawamba started, we did music where we were just shouting in people's faces, you know,
Yeah.
believe this, do this,
Yes.
this is what you should be doing. And it's interesting, I had this conversation with Bob from the band the other day where we were talking about the idea that actually what we did is we made a decision to start using humour in our music as a way of trying to make our ideas a bit more accessible to people.
And how did you use the humour in your performances?
Well, we used to make Alice and Danbert wear ridiculous costumes on stage, you know, so it became more of a theatre thing. It was like, we'd call it, I suppose, agitprop theatre. So we were stealing ideas from a lot of stuff that we'd seen, like whether it was 60s stuff or agitprop stuff from like Germany, you know, Bertolt Brecht stuff and all that sort of thing. And so we were stealing ideas from all that in a way that we wanted to present because the scene we were in at the time, this anarcho-punk scene, it was very dour. It was really sort of serious and it was like being in a bubble. We just wanted to, you know, widen our horizons a bit and get a lot more people to listen to what we were saying. Because I think our philosophy was, look, we've got something to say and we believe in what we want to say.
Yes.
So why would we not want as many people as possible to hear that message?
Absolutely.
So that's what we tried to do.
So then did you feel it changed the way that you were received if you were initially shouting and then you changed to this humour, comedy, like performance type?
Yeah, because everybody likes a good melody.
Yes.
Everybody likes a tune, you know, and wants to be able to, you know, the songs you love are the ones that you immediately recognise and you join in on. And, you know, that played out for us, obviously, with Tubthumping eventually happening and where we wrote a song that maybe the political content it wasn't our greatest political statement we've ever made, but it was a song that had a universal message in that appealed to, you know, a large millions and millions and millions of people still, you know, enjoyed that song. And we still get letters and, you know, emails from people saying how that song changed their lives or it really helped them.
How do you think the song got so big?
I suppose we sort of touched on it earlier that I think it was a song that has such a universal message because that thing of I get knocked down but I get up again.
Yeah.
People apply that to any given situation. You know, it's just about resilience and it's about, you know, it's about survival and it's about, you know, like not giving up, all those sort of ideas. And the fact that it's like over 25 years ago that it came out and we're still talking about it now is amazing. And we still get, you know, it still crops up in TV programs and in films and stuff like that. People still want to use it and it's just become part of popular culture in a way. Like at the time, there was always, like I used to say, there's three things that I was most pleased about with that song, what it did, and one was that it was played in the Rover's Return on Coronation Street. Then it was played in the Queen Vic on EastEnders. But then Homer Simpson sang it in an episode of The Simpsons.
Yes, I saw that on your film, I Get Knocked Down.
Yeah. And that was like, that was the only time we let anybody change the words to that song. And it was because Homer was singing it. So I just thought, that song's just become part of popular culture and it's left a mark on society in some way.
Absolutely, it will continue to do so.
Yeah.
Because you were a squat in Leeds and then all of a sudden you have this chart-topping.
It was totally bizarre
single.
because we've had this conversation amongst the band a lot. Was it an accident that song was a hit, or was it inevitable that we would at some point have a hit single because of the songs we were writing? when it actually happened, we never expected it. We didn't write it to be we didn't even know it was going to be the single. You know, we were performing it live before it came out, and people were going, "Oh, that song should be the single," and we were like, "Should it? Is that the one?" And they were like, "Yeah, that should definitely be the single." We're like, "Oh, all right then," and then obviously it just went absolutely crazy. The impact it had, and so we were totally thrown into this other world that we'd never been a part of.
Yeah.
Which was bizarre because that world is not a world that any of us particularly enjoyed being a part of. Because we never set out to be celebrities. We didn't want to be, fame was never part of our agenda.
Yes.
Celebrity, it was just something that happened to us. And so we'd find ourselves, every time we were performing that song, it would be like, right, look, we've got into this situation where we've got this huge platform.
Yes.
We're talking to all these people. Loads of people are watching us. What are we going to do in this situation? Are we just going to become part of the machine, or are we going to try and do something with that?
Yes.
And so we found ourselves like thinking, right, we'll change the words to the song. We'll include something about this person who's on death row, or or at the Brits, we'll slag off the Labour Party, and because we were there with dockers from the dock workers strike in Liverpool. And so we were always trying to or even sometimes it'd just be, right, what we're going to wear on our t-shirts, so we were always trying to think of how we could subvert
Yes.
that situation, or how we could get our message across while still being, this lovable pop band, I suppose.
Absolutely. And you're using your voice, that you have a platform. How are you going to use your voice now?
Yeah.
So how was it so you're referring to when you were on the David Letterman show?
Yes.
And
that
you
was an
changed,
example. Yeah.
when you had changed the words, what happened after that?
There was chaos, absolute
Yeah.
chaos. We weren't, they record that show about an hour or so before it goes out. And so we were doing a gig somewhere in New York that night. So we just did the show, changed the words, and then we went off to get ready for this gig we were doing. Our management and that, and the record company, they were absolutely terrified that the Letterman show would not show the song with the changed words. But that wasn't our, that by that point we were somewhere else, and we weren't involved in all that discussion and that. But then it did eventually go out. It did go out as was, and we thought, wow, that's good.
Absolutely.
And so we were like, should we do that again then? Yeah. And so we did, so we did
Yeah.
it about 2 or 3 times, a similar sort of thing. And then that culminated obviously in the Brits, where we thought, right, we'll change the words to the song there as well. And so it was just realising how far you could push those things. And we never set out to have a career in pop music, or be a career musician. So we were never precious about what happened to anything that we did, or weren't thinking, oh, this is really going to affect our career, or this is going to mean that that it'll be the end
Yes.
for us and all that sort of thing. Those weren't issues for us. That gave us a freedom to do what we wanted in a way that a lot of people don't have that freedom to just think, fuck it, I don't care, this is what I think.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have to bite their tongues, whether it's at work or whatever situation it's in. You have to pretend.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't be your authentic self. You have to conform to someone else's ideology.
So we were always in a position there where we weren't part of a political party. We weren't we all had each other's backs. And so whenever Alice in particular would say something outrageous on television or on radio, and it would become a news item, we'd be like, oh, don't worry about it, it's all right, we're not bothered, it's fine, we were making a point about shoplifting and poverty and stuff like that. So it was, there'd always be a point to it. Unfortunately, Alice did get a bit carried away with it after a while and realised that she was starting to say more and more outrageous things to the point at which we were always getting asked to apologise to various people
Okay.
for stuff that we'd done and said, and we were like, no, we're not going to apologise. we're not going to apologise, but it did get to the point where Alice was like, yeah, I think I'm going to have to rein it in a little bit because, we're getting into a lot of trouble now.
At least she had the awareness to realise that herself.
Yeah.
Would you do anything differently looking back?
Probably not, no, because interesting, what did happen after the Brits thing is that we were that was sort of the beginning of the end in a way.
This was the water
over John Prescott
Yeah.
thing, yeah. Because what happened is that a lot of TV shows and radio shows got frightened about having us on their show because they thought that we were going to cause trouble. We were the most pleasant group of people you could ever wish to meet, and we were really polite, and we would tidy up after ourselves and stuff like that.
Yes.
And be really lovely to everybody. But we had this reputation for being troublemakers.
Yeah.
And so so a lot of people, we ended up as like sort of shooting ourselves in the foot in a way. But then a lot of people in Chumbawamba didn't enjoy that level of fame and attention. Because it's something that we never set out to do, and were not prepared for in a way. So in a way, I think when the fame was over, I think some people were quite relieved that period of the band had sort of come to an end, and we could go back to being an activist band, which were in a smaller arena where we felt a lot more comfortable.
And how about yourself? How are things for you now?
So I left Chumbawamba in about 2005, which is 20 years ago now. I just saw like a period of like not being sure what I wanted to do. So I struggled for a few years trying to work out what it was I wanted to do next. When Chumbawamba finally finished as a band, an operating band, I thought, okay, now I can start making I'd always wanted to make a documentary about the band. In fact, I wanted that documentary to be about what can you do as a political band when you enter the mainstream.
Right.
Can you make a difference? That's exactly what I wanted it to be about. And so I met this, I had this editor who I'd worked with on a documentary called Jim Scott, who introduced me to Sophie Robinson.
Yes.
Who's a really brilliant director who was, Jim was editing with her film that she made called My Beautiful Broken Brain, which is a fantastic documentary. And Jim said I should meet Sophie because Sophie had done a Kickstarter to raise the money to pay Jim to edit the film. And now we're trying to raise money to make a film about Chumbawamba. And so so Jim set up this meeting where I went to meet Sophie, and I was like, oh yeah, will you do this Kickstarter with me? I'll pay you to do this Kickstarter because I want to raise some money to make this film. And Sophie was like, yeah, I'll do a Kickstarter with you, but I'd quite like to make the film with you as well. And I was like, all right, okay then. I was like, wow, brilliant, fantastic. So we did a Kickstarter, that did really well, and that enabled us to start making the film.
And then TV projects now, are you going to continue?
Yeah, so we did that documentary, finished that documentary in lockdown, and then released it. We toured it around the country, did Q&As everywhere. It was really good. What was fascinating about that actually was seeing, finding out that there was so many people out there who had been affected by the band.
Yes.
And that we'd had played a role in their, in their political education or in their, lots of people had really fond memories, and you would meet all these people who were like, oh my God, you won't believe how your band affected me, and they'd bring kids along, they'd got the kids into Chumbawamba as well. That was really life affirming for me. It was a wonderful experience to come across all these people who were like really old, Chumbawamba fans who we'd had an influence on, because I'd set out with that idea of like, can you make a difference? Entering the mainstream. I think I was thinking on a sort of a much larger global scale. And what I learned when we took the film out was actually we touched a lot of people's lives on that scale. And that almost felt far more important than what we did up here. The fact that we made a difference there. And a friend of mine in Brighton had seen the film and seen the one-man show, and he worked in this production company. He said, why don't you write a TV series? And we were like, oh no, you wanted to just record the one-man show. And I was like, what's the point of that? What would we do with that? And so he was like, well, you know, maybe we should turn it into something. So then me and Sophie started talking about what we could do with it. And we had this idea that, well, maybe we should do a TV series about me coming back to Billingham.
Yes.
And so I was like, yeah, that's a brilliant idea. And so we started writing this thing about there being an older version of me, a me, and a younger version of me, because we wanted to make it generational, you know, about what's going on now for people. You know, if Chumbawamba formed today, what would that look like? And how, you know, what's the difference now in how you get a political message across and how you reach people than how we did it, you know, back in the 80s and 90s. And so that was one idea, and then we just had this older version of me as well. And so we started writing that, and then we introduced this whole idea of, because it was really, it was just a big thing at the time, which is, it's got even bigger now because of that adolescence series that's just been on. So we had already started writing this thing about how I have this fictional 14-year-old son who gets sucked into the manosphere, into that world. And how, and so it's like this story, so it became this story about how he gets sucked into that world and what happened, how that unfolds. But weirdly, we set that at Wynyard Hall, just outside of Billingham, as that's where they would be meeting. And so we sort of based it all around, you know, a lot of it's, you know, well, we're placing it all around Billingham. So it's really interesting to come back in the last year or so. I feel as I've been back here quite a lot in the last couple of years, and you know, realizing the passion and the what there is up here and how exciting it is. And like Sophie says herself, it's really nice to get, I don't know whether this is because she's just getting a bit older and she just likes to get out of the house a bit more. She says, oh, it's lovely to get out to, you know, to come up north and get out to London.
Yes.
Because of everything being London-centric. It's really good to do stuff outside of London.
Absolutely, and it's really nice to see more things happen as well in the northeast, because quite often we have been overlooked by TV projects, the music industry. So it's brilliant that you're bringing it back to Teesside.
I mean, I don't want to blow smoke up his arse, but you know, meeting Michael has made, you know, quite a massive difference to the whole project in a way.
Yes.
But because it's, you know, like, because his enthusiasm for the northeast in particular has sort of inspired us to, like, you know, move the project on.
Yes, he's very passionate about creating opportunities.
Yeah.
But yeah.
He is, yeah. He's an idiot as well. He's really good at it. He's an amazing catalyst for a lot of stuff that we really appreciate.
Thank you so much for speaking with us
You're
today,
welcome.
Dunstan. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I'm really excited about your future endeavours. Good luck with your TV projects.
Thank you.
And thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. That was lovely.